The prosthetic liners were soaking in a bucket by the bathroom door. That was the first thing anyone saw when they walked into Carol Merritt's apartment in Defiance, Ohio. Not a welcome mat, not a coat rack. A blue plastic bucket with 2 silicone sleeves sitting in solution the way some people left their teeth at night. Carol was 34 years old. She had brown hair cut short at the jaw and the kind of build that still looked like it had somewhere to be, even when it was just moving from the kitchen to the couch. She had served 8 years in the United States Army, 2 deployments to Afghanistan, and 1 morning outside Kandahar that changed what the word walking meant for the rest of her life. It was a Tuesday in September when she found the dog tag. She had been looking for a pen in the drawer of her side table and her fingers closed around something cold and flat. She already knew what it was before she pulled it out. She held it up in the pale morning light coming through the window. The name on it was not hers. Kandahar, Afghanistan, 7 years earlier. The noise came before the ground moved. That was the part nobody believed when she tried to explain it later. There was a sound like a door slamming very far away, and then the earth beneath the Humvee lifted as if it were simply done being the earth. Corporal Danny Reyes had been sitting across from her. He was 22 years old from Laredo, Texas, and he had a habit of folding his gum wrapper into tiny cranes and leaving them on the dashboard. She used to give him grief about it. She used to say, "Reyes, why is there a paper bird on my dashboard?" And he would say, "Because birds are lucky, Sergeant." And she would say, "That is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard." She did not hear the rest of what happened. She was told about it later in pieces, the way people tell you things they are not sure you can hold all at once. Danny Reyes did not come home. She did, but not the same way she left. Back in Defiance, Carol set the dog tag on the kitchen table and sat across from it. She did not know how it had gotten into her drawer. She had a memory of picking it up at some point in some parking lot or hospital room, but the sequence of things from that first year was not always clear. Outside, a combine moved slow and steady across a field at the edge of town. The grain elevator on Route 24 caught the early light the way it always did. She made coffee, she let it get cold, she looked at the dog tag. "You going to stare at that all day?" Her mother, Ruth, was standing in the doorway in her coat holding a paper bag from Linda's Diner on Main Street. Ruth was 61, white-haired, the kind of woman who showed love by appearing in your doorway with food. She had driven 40 minutes to do it. "I found it in the drawer," Carol said. Ruth set the bag on the counter and looked at her daughter for a long moment. "Come eat something." "Mom." "I know," Ruth said. "Come eat something anyway." Carol had been back in Defiance for 3 years by then. She worked a few hours a week remotely for a veterans nonprofit, answering phones, handling intake forms. Nobody from town asked her much about the war, not because they did not care, because they did not know how to start. The VFW hall on Jefferson Street had photographs on the wall going back to World War II. Farm boys from Defiance County in wool uniforms, men from Korea with their shoulders square and their faces young. Carol's photograph was not on that wall. She had not been asked. She had not asked. At the 4th of July parade that summer, the color guard had marched down Main Street and Carol had watched from the curb next to Ruth. There was a moment, a gap in the formation, where a unit was supposed to walk and then did not, and people had just looked at the empty space and then looked away. She thought about Danny Reyes and his paper cranes. She thought about that gap. It was October when she met James Whitfield. He ran a small outdoor program out of a rented space on the edge of town, an old machine shed that smelled like chalk dust and nylon rope. He was 56, white-bearded, built like a man who had been climbing things his whole life. He was also a Vietnam-era veteran, though he never led with that. She had gone in on a Thursday afternoon because she had seen a flyer tacked to the board at the library and had nothing else to do that afternoon and was tired of having nothing else to do. "You're Carol," he said, not a question. "How do you know that?" "Ruth called me," he said, 3 weeks ago. She said her daughter was stubborn and I said so am I. We figured we had a deal." Carol looked at him for a long moment. "What exactly is the program?" "Adaptive climbing. We work with veterans mostly. Amputees, TBI, PTSD, whatever brings you in." "I don't need a programs." "I know," he said. "Come back Saturday anyway." She came back Saturday. She did not climb anything that first day. She watched. She watched a man with one arm work a route on the training wall with a focus that was so absolute it almost looked like anger. She watched a woman who could not have been more than 25 years old reach a handhold she had been trying for 40 minutes to reach, and the sound she made when she got it was not a celebration. It was something quieter than that, something that had been held back for a long time. James brought Carol a coffee and stood next to her and did not say anything. "How long have you been doing this?" she said. 11 years. Why? He thought about it. Because the mountain doesn't know what happened to you, he said. It just knows if you're on it or not. She started climbing in November. By spring, she was leading beginners on the training wall. By the following autumn, she was on a rock face in Kentucky, teaching a group of 8 veterans how to read the stone, how to trust weight to a prosthetic limb, how to stay present in a body that had been changed by force. She was not particularly inspiring about it. She did not give speeches. She said things like, "Move your hip, not your arm." She said, "Look at where you are, not where you were." She said, "The next hold is right there, you're just not looking at it." The veterans listened, they climbed. The following July, Carol stood at the edge of the 4th of July parade route on Main Street in Defiance. Ruth was beside her. The color guard came through, and this time Carol was part of the formation, not marching. She never marched. But she was there holding a rope she had brought from the shed, a small thing, a token, a habit from the wall. A boy of maybe 9 years old was standing near her. He looked at her legs the way kids do, direct and without calculation. "Are those robot legs?" he said. "Kind of," she said. "Can you still climb things?" Carol looked at him. Then she looked down the length of Main Street at the storefronts and the flags and the grain elevator just visible at the edge of town. "Yes," she said. The boy nodded satisfied and turned back to watch the parade. Carol held the rope in her hands and felt the weight of it. She thought about Danny Ray's. She thought about paper cranes. She thought about a wall in Kentucky and a group of 8 people who had all, at one point, believed they were done climbing. She did not think about the dog tag, but it was still on her kitchen table. She had not put it away. She had moved it, though, away from the shadow and closer to the window, where in the morning the light could find it. Carol's story is one of thousands that never make the news. If you know a veteran carrying something heavy and quiet, share this with them. Leave your own story in the comments below, and if this channel means something to you, subscribe and stay with us. There are more stories to tell.